Hi, my name is Dan Klassen, and this is my interpersonal communication project for Human Services 508. I hope to weave together here what we've been working through together all semester. This presentation borrows strongly from my posts, from my journal, from self-examination in other classes, and even other points in my life. The overarching calling in my life is to move with God as an agent of healing in a broken world. I want to experience this healing myself. And then, as 2 Corinthians 1 verse 4 says, to comfort others out of the comfort that I myself have received. The overarching goal in communication, then, becomes practically expressing the love of God and the value He places on people by listening to them in a way that makes them feel understood. Having listened to the point of reaching genuine understanding, I would then have a more truthful picture of reality and also better know how to care for that person. In short, my goal is to listen well and to see more broadly. We began this class with an analysis of our personality type according to the DISC test by Carbonell. I'm categorized there as a high SI. Reading Carbonell's description of SI on page 155 almost made me laugh out loud a couple of times. From my kindergarten report card to conversations this past week, people identify in me the strengths and weaknesses described under that personality type. It's things like sensitive to other people's needs, slow in completion of tasks, passionate about teamwork, excellent in conflict but too ready to compromise, slow in decision-making, desire to be well-liked, and on and on. Also typical of this SI personality, I'm often able to build rapport with others in a very short period of time. Sometimes it just takes a little twist in the cognitive schemata. My wife, who has also recently taken a communication course, turned to me the other day and said, "You mess with people's scripts. Have you ever noticed how many people say what after you ask them how they're doing? It's not because they haven't heard the words, it's because you're not using the normal script." So since then, I noticed that instead of saying, "How are you?" as a part of greeting someone, I usually pause slightly, look the person in the eye and say, "How's your day been?" Doesn't sound like much, but most of the time after people confirm what I said, or question me with their eyes for a moment, instead of saying fine, they launch into a story from their day. I've often received very personal information from complete strangers in a very short period of time. My wife just laughs at me now. I think it's part of a gift God has given me to use. My wife says that here and elsewhere, I mess with the script and surprise people. As I seek then to take who I've become so far and move toward healthier, more honest conversation, there's certain barriers I'm aware of. Perhaps oddly, I sense barriers in what sound like opposing points of behavior. The first involves judgment, and the second agreement. Atkinson writes that there's a freedom found in non-judgmental listening, found nowhere else. Peterson also agrees with that, encouraging his readers towards non-judgmental listening. He says on page 97, "With a curious, non-judgmental attitude, we can understand behavior we'd never condone." There are various seasons in my life where non-judgmental listening has been described as a strength. Similar to Peterson's autobiographical notes, as a teenager I often found myself in situations where people found in me a listener and expressed thoughts and feelings that didn't seem to be aired with others. That continued through college and is true still. I'm honored by the bravery of others in expressing themselves to me, and I do work hard to be a safe person to talk to. But my internal struggle has constantly been one of judgment. I see myself as better than others if I match up to a higher degree to what I see as acceptable behavior. Other times, I'm intimidated by someone who seems to match up to that to a higher degree than I do. It's a legalistic, behavior-based view of life. Knowing Jesus roots that out, but I am a Pharisee in default mode. Religion comes natural in some deep-rooted desire to achieve acceptability. And I think I can project that on those that I love the most. There comes a point where I'm no longer safe to talk to because on certain issues or emotions, they're outside my bounds of acceptability. Perhaps because of that battle and a desire to counteract it, I can also err on the opposite end of the spectrum. I can project acceptance of talkers' behavior when that's not the case. I appreciated very much Peterson's discussion on page 104 of listening without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, and defending. The temptation to express agreement for me is quite strong. I think because I often look for cues of affirmation of a relationship when I'm at a point of vulnerability, I try and give that to others as well. But Peterson sees the opposite. He sees the push for agreement to be a substitute for friendship and to be based on insecurity. Agreement or disagreement isn't essential between friends. I try to express understanding of the motives that have brought a person to the place where they are. But in expressing understanding, it's hard not also to give the idea that I agree. And when a person is flat-brained, by Peterson's analysis, they're hearing through their filter at that moment. And all that vagueness on my part is getting categorized as I agree as well. So walking that tightrope of encouragement without falling off on agreement or disagreement seems key for me. Well, as a part of our coursework, we watched the movie Fireproof as a sort of summing up of the concepts that we've seen. Regarding internal noise pollution in particular, there's a scene near the end that was an eye-opener for me. Catherine is not feeling well and is sitting on their bed, and Caleb approaches to take care of her. I connect emotionally with Caleb in that scene. He's being vulnerable, taking initiative. He sums up what's taken place and tries to make things right. His words are both logically true and emotionally laden. I see it and want to be him, making things right for all I've ever done. For some reason, though, on a different day, I watched that scene again with an eye to see it through Catherine's perspective. And if you watch that scene, internally saying to yourself, "This man has been untrustworthy and hurtful to me," Caleb's words are surprisingly easy to blow off as cliché or insincere, until those tears and plea for forgiveness at the end. And even then, if you believed him to be manipulative or unstable, one would be wary still, and Catherine's character seems to hang on to some of that. It struck me how generalizations or summing up statements that I've spoken before could ring cliché, the opposite of my intentions. I was struck by how important that internal conversation is. Finally, I was moved by how sacrificial action blows through all such smokescreens. The ultimate example, of course, is the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Caleb's gift in the movie and Jesus' gift in real life blow through all pretensions. A person can still reject it, both at the marriage level and the salvation level. Sacrifice is not foolproof resolution. It's essentially a huge risk. But it is the only thing that saves, on all levels. I typically make goals for myself each year. I print them out and stick them up all over the place. This past year, the goals that had the least follow-through were two that included setting aside some good time for listening. Of those unfulfilled goals, the main idea had been setting aside time for listening and reflection in a couple of my most important relationships. It was brought back to my attention while reading an article from Donald Carbo from our Stewart text called Blackfeet Listening. It references Native American concepts about listening. It reminded me of some special moments with God, and even the process of coming to the point of asking my wife to marry me. Those events included setting aside time in a full schedule for silence, listening, and reflection. This past week, when I wrote my goals for the coming year, I looked carefully at those that didn't come about. I'd made a habit of letting those goals become secondary to immediate needs. I believe my issues with judgment and agreement both find their solution in that same solitude. Humility comes in time spent in recalibration with Christ. I get a clear perspective that the world does not revolve around me. I see my actions in His light instead of mine. My agreement issue reflects an out-of-check desire to be well-liked. This also calms down in that time spent around Christ. I receive there that solid assurance of being loved. I enjoy the personal nature of the change process God has given us. As Reeves writes, both speaker and listener are changed in the listening process. As with Peterson, I hope to be the kind of person in whose presence good things happen. I appreciate this acknowledgement that the qualities of genuineness, empathy, and warmth are far more essential to healthy therapeutic relationships than mastery of correct techniques. I appreciate that spirit. Practically, I intend to concentrate on reflecting back to a person accurately what they're saying without inserting my bias, at least not consciously. I'm going to put that talker-listener card somewhere I can see it regularly. And my intentions this year are toward daily offering undistracted time in my most important relationships. I'm thankful for this opportunity to more effectively move with God as an agent of healing in our broken world.